Guys, welcome back. So now we'll look at indirect speech. Previously we looked at what direct speech was, and we looked at some rules, and we looked at some examples. So now we'll do the same thing with indirect speech. So let's begin with the definition. Indirect speech is a means of expressing the contents of the statements or questions or the other utterances without quoting them explicitly, as is done in direct speech. So I hope you remember when I was talking about direct speech, I emphasized on the point that we use quotes or quotation marks or speech marks when we are dealing with direct speech. So in indirect speech, we do not use the quotes marks. That is the biggest difference between direct and indirect speech. And that's something that you always have to remember, that we never use quotes in indirect speech. So indirect speech is basically the kind of speech when we are where we are expressing the contents of the statement. So what this means is that we're not using the exact same words, right? As long as they convey the meaning, as long as they follow the rules of indirect speech, which I will be discussing, they do not need to follow or use the exact same words, right? In fact, as we proceed, I'll even tell you that you can even rearrange the words as long as they make sense, right? And they follow some basic rules. But in direct speech, you have to use the exact same words. So if I say something like the sky is blue, then those are the exact same words that you have to use. Exact same words. You cannot say that I said that the sky is bluish. It needs to be blue. All the words remain the same, the exact same. And one thing that you need to know about indirect speech is that it's also known as reported speech. That's something that you should remember, so that just in case somebody mentions the term reported speech, you don't get confused. It's the exact same thing as indirect speech. It's the same thing, just different names. So now let's look at some rules. Alright, so the first rule, as I talked about previously, is that the quotes are not used in indirect or reported speech. Right? So I hope you remember what quotes are, and they are not used in indirect speech. The next one is that the verbs are often changed to past tense. Okay. The next rule is that unlike direct speech, in reported speech, order of words can be changed and rearranged. So like we previously talked about, in indirect speech, you cannot change the order of the words. You cannot change the words, you cannot change their orders, you cannot change anything in indirect speech. But in indirect speech, you can change those words and you can even rearrange them. Right? They do not need to be in the same order or the same, like one thing that came after the other one in direct speech does not need to be the same way in indirect speech. I hope I'm being clear. All right. And the last rule that you have to remember is that pronouns may also be changed sometimes. We'll be looking at some examples now in order to make sure that we understand these rules and what the definition means. So the first example is that Ramesh said he was too tired to go to the movies. So the one thing that you notice right away as soon as you look at this example is that there are no quotation marks, and you'll notice that's the biggest difference, right? So there are no quotes in here, there are no speech marks in there in this example or any of the following examples. All of them are in indirect form, right? So the next one is Deepika said she does not like ice cream as it hurts her teeth. So again, there are no quotes marks. And the next example is our teacher questioned us about the ongoing coursework. So if I look at the third example, right, our teacher questioned us about the ongoing coursework. So I hope you remember that we talked about verbs being in past tense, right? So if I were to convert this sentence in direct form, if I was to convert this to direct form, okay, let's just imagine for 5 minutes. We'll imagine for 5 minutes what might have been going on in a classroom, right? So a teacher might have come in and she might have picked any student at random, and she might have just said something like, or questioned him something simply like, tell me what exactly is going on in your class, right? That could be her statement. That could be her question. So when we have to take that and we have to convert that into indirect form, we will change the word question to questioned, right? So our teacher questioned us about the ongoing work, right? So again, you can see that while I'm converting this, you'll notice that I'm not using the exact same words, right? I'm just using other words that convey the meaning which was same as that of the teacher's words. So don't worry about the conversion as we proceed on. As we move forwards, you'll come across a lot of rules that will help you better convert one form to another. Okay, the next example is the guard informed that the pool would be closed for cleaning purposes. Again, no quotation marks. And the final one is Siddhartha asked me to remind you to return your borrowed book. So again, in one thing that we noticed was that there are no quotation marks anywhere, and we noticed that that the words are rearranged. Right? We noticed that there is a lot of past tense verbs that are being used. And with this, I'd like to conclude indirect speech. In the next part, you will be looking at some examples of direct and indirect speech, and you'll be trying to differentiate between the two.